Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaste and good morning, everybody. So, is the volume good enough? Is it loud enough? Yes. All right. Because I've been getting complaints about low volume from my end, so I have to keep adjusting it. So the first talk I'd like to offer is what is Advaita. If you look at the subject, the title is what is Advaita, and we have the retreat on Yoga Vedanta. The first off, what is this thing about Vedanta and Advaita? This thing has to be cleared up. So Advaita is one of the schools of Vedanta. Vedanta has many schools, and one of them is Advaita Vedanta. Um, and that's what I'll be speaking about. But to back up a little bit, we have to know what Vedanta is to know what Advaita is. About a couple of years ago, Swami Chaitanyanandaji, in the Vedanta Society of St. Louis, he asked me to give a talk on this very subject. What is Vedanta? He said, think afresh and think about what is Vedanta and tell us what you come up with. He says he sometimes springs this on visiting Swamis, asking them to go back to the basics and think anew about what Vedanta is. So I did that. I sat down and thought about what is Vedanta basically. And I came up with 7 answers. So I'll share them all with you briefly. So 7 observations, 7 different answers, 7 different perspectives on Vedanta, which includes Advaita Vedanta. First is, it's something that I'm borrowing from Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was asked to talk about Vedanta at Harvard University. And he started off with this description of Vedanta. He said it is the philosophy of the diverse sects of Hinduism. Hinduism is vast and diverse with many, many sects. In each of these sects, different flavors of Hinduism, if you will, there is a philosophy behind it. And Vedanta is more or less the philosophy of Hinduism. There'll be some school of Vedanta at the root of, at the core of the different sects of Hinduism. For example, take us, the Ramakrishna order. Revered Mataji is here, Revered Swamiji is here. We all belong to this order of monks. And our core philosophy is a school of Vedanta. It is Advaita Vedanta. Another group of Hindus who are pretty well known, I would say, in the United States. Most people have seen them as the Hare Krishnas. So they belong to the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. They actually have another school of Vedanta, the Achintya Bheda Veda school, as their core philosophy. Some of you may have seen these glorious temples coming up in different parts of the United States. And if you go to them, they're magnificent, huge temples belonging to the Swaminarayan sect, who are mostly from Gujarat. And they too have another school of Vedanta as their core philosophy. At one time, they were identified with the Vishishta Advaita school of Vedanta. Now they're developing their own school of Vedanta. So, when you approach a Hindu temple, when you approach a practicing Hindu, you will probably come across a wide range of icons, Ganesha or Kali or Durga, a variety of rituals, stories, a bewildering diversity. But if you probe deeper, you will come across a certain flavor of Vedanta. So Vedanta is the foundational philosophy in all its different flavors, different schools, sort of the philosophical foundation of Hinduism. That's one answer. Second, the word Vedanta itself literally means the end of the Vedas. Anta is one meaning is end. So the Vedas, the core scriptures of Hinduism, um, they basically stand for timeless spiritual wisdom, but also for the four books which go by the name of the Vedas, the Rig Veda and the Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda. So Vedanta would mean the end of those books. No, it literally does not mean the end of the books. Vedanta is contained in certain texts which are called the Upanishads. And these Upanishads are found sometimes at the end of the Vedas, sometimes in the middle, they're scattered across the Vedas. So a better meaning of Vedanta would be the, not the end of the Vedas, but the final teachings of the Vedas, the ultimate teachings of the Vedas. There's a word in Sanskrit, Siddhanta. Siddhanta means the final conclusions, the ultimate teachings. So Vedanta is the Siddhanta of the Vedas, the final teachings. In that sense, it's a more precise sense of the meaning of the word Vedanta. A philosopher recently, Professor Arindam Chakravarti, he said another meaning of Anta is edge. So it calls up the memories of the razor's edge, Somerset Maugham's famous novel, which and the phrase is borrowed from the Kathopanishad. So walking on the spiritual path is likened to walking on the edge of a razor. So in that sense, Vedanta is the cutting edge of knowledge, he said. It's not some ancient philosophy, but it's also the cutting edge of knowledge. I like that. So that's something that I'll share with you also. Vedanta can also be regarded as the cutting edge of knowledge. Third, more precisely, Vedanta is the Upanishads. I referred to the Upanishads just now as the spiritual philosophical texts found scattered within the Vedas. So more precisely, Vedanta means the Upanishads. In fact, a definition of Vedanta which we had to memorize as novices in our monastery at Belur, it comes from a text called the Vedanta Sara, Essence of Vedanta. Vedanta Nama Upanishad Pramanam, the source of spiritual knowledge called the Upanishads, that is Vedanta. And together with these texts, the Upanishads, of which there are many, we take 10 of them more or less as the major Upanishads for certain reasons. So they are foundational to Vedanta. And based on these 10 Upanishads, there is the Brahma Sutras, based on all the Upanishads, there is the Brahma Sutras, another text, which discusses philosophical issues, hermeneutical issues arising from a study of the Upanishads. So that's also part of Vedanta. And the most well-known text of Vedanta is the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, if you ask for one text of Hinduism, it would be the Bhagavad Gita. So the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita, all together, they are the textual foundations of Vedanta. They are called Prasthanatrayi, which means the triple canon or the triple textual foundation of Vedanta. So if you want to know what are the texts of Vedanta, they are the Upanishads, a set of texts, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. And then there is a huge corpus of literature, enormous. Commentators have come on these texts and they have written explanations, detailed explanations of these texts. So the explanations of Upanishads, explanations of the Brahma Sutras, explanations of the Bhagavad Gita. And these commentaries have given rise to different schools of Vedanta. So this is where Advaita comes in. The different schools of Vedanta have come from the commentaries. Specifically, very precisely, if you want to ask which text is central to the philosophical differentiation of the different schools of Vedanta, it would be the Brahma Sutras. The Brahma Sutras, there are multiple commentaries on the Brahma Sutras, and as these commentaries came out, they became foundational for different philosophical systems of Vedanta. So for example, Shankaracharya's commentary on the Brahma Sutras becomes foundational for the Advaita Vedanta school, the non-dual school of Vedanta, to which I belong, we all belong, and which I'll be speaking about specifically today. But So did Ramanujacharya's commentary on the same Brahma Sutras becomes philosophically foundational for the qualified monastic school of Vedanta, Vishishta Advaita. Madhvacharya's commentary, foundational for the Dvaita, dualistic school of Vedanta. There are other schools of Vedanta. I mentioned the Achintya Bheda Veda school, which is the Vedantic philosophy of the ISKCON and the Gaudiya Vaishnava sect of Hinduism. There is Shuddha Advaita school based on Vallabhacharya's commentary on the Brahma Sutras. There is the Dvaita Advaita school based on Nimbarkacharya's commentary on the Brahma Sutras, and so on. So all these different flavors of Vedanta. So that's another way. That is number 3. But let's go deeper into it philosophically. And now I'm going to specifically talk about Advaita Vedanta, about Advaita. What is it? What does it teach? What is its uniqueness? One good way of understanding Advaita is by asking the question, what is it not? To know what it is, it's good to know what is it not. So a kind of religion talks about the goal which is to be attained by going somewhere. Most theistic religions talk about a hereafter and somewhere else, heaven. God is in heaven, and our goal is to reach heaven and be with God. It's true of Christianity, of Islam, of different forms of theistic Hinduism. So different conceptions of heaven, different conceptions of God, and what it means to go to heaven and be with God. And that's supposed to be the goal of religion, and that's supposed to be a solution to our problems. So that's one kind of religion. Traveling in space, let us say, going from here to somewhere else, a better somewhere else. Well, Vedanta is not about that. Advaita is not about that. I won't say Vedanta is not about that, but I'll say Advaita is not about going somewhere else. It is not about a different time. So sometimes religion is put in this way, that you have to wait. After death, you will see God. Or after the coming of the prophet or the Messiah, after something will happen, and then only you are really spiritual, there is really God for you, and so on and so forth. Well, Advaita is not about time, that you have to wait, not now and then. No. Advaita is also not about a different object apart from us. See, theistic religion talks about God as if it were a different entity, an other with a capital O, a magnificent, wonderful, but still other, something else. Advaita Vedanta is not about something else. Advaita is not about going from one place to another. It is right here, it is everywhere. It is not about another time, it is right now and all the time. It is not about another object, it is all objects, and specifically yourself. Nothing other than yourself. In fact, more precisely, not an object, it's about the subject. So Advaita Vedanta is not a journey in space. It's not a journey in time. It's not a journey from one object, yourself, to something else. What is it a journey of? What is the spiritual journey in Advaita? It is a journey from ignorance to knowledge. There is something right here, right now, and it is you. It is I. It is all of us. The only problem is we do not know, and we need to know. So that's number 4. What is it not, and what is it? Number 5, once again, what is the method of Advaita Vedanta? Well, what is not the method of Advaita Vedanta? Now we have to take this carefully. I'm going to say certain things which I'm going to take back very soon, but we need to do this in order to dig deep. You see, one way of understanding something is to drill deep into it and leave aside everything that is secondary and go to the core of the issue and then bring other things in. So I'm going to leave aside certain things which are not essential to the proper understanding of Advaita Vedanta, but don't think that they are unimportant. Don't think that I'm rejecting them. I'm not. I'm going to bring them back again. This is where a lot of devotees feel uncomfortable. Advaita Vedanta is not about action, karma. Vedanta is not about faith, belief, about devotion. No. Advaita Vedanta is not even about meditation, with pranams and respects to Swamiji, who just spent a lot of energy telling us about meditation. Advaita Vedanta is not about that. It's not about karma. It's not about bhakti. It is not about yoga. Remember again, I'll bring all of them back, but we need to know what is Advaita Vedanta essentially. So you'll find a lot in Shankara's commentaries on the Upanishads, the Gita, and the Brahma Sutras, where he is vehemently attacking concepts of action and karma. He says what we are trying to realize is not something that can be produced. It's not something that can be reached. It's not something that can be refined. So all the things that you do with karma, with action, you can go from one place to another. You can make something. You can refine something, extract something else. None of those things are possible with the reality which we are seeking in Advaita Vedanta. It is also not faith. You see, this is very interesting. In this country, especially in the United States, religion and faith are synonymous. In fact, the name more popular for religion is faith. And if there is one thing that Advaita Vedanta is pretty far from, its faith. So it'll be rather strange to call Advaita faith. It's not a question of belief. You see, the problem with belief, in belief, what we're asked to do is, there is God. If you ask, how do I know? Well, the scriptures say so. Holy people have been telling us so. And if you ask any further, you'll say, don't ask. This is all the answer that you're going to get. And then you must believe in it. Unfortunately, that kind of religion is under tremendous attack today. The new atheists, Daniel Dennett or Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens and so on and so forth. If you listen to them, don't listen to them. But if you do listen to them, you're going to suffer a major loss of faith. So it's very difficult to stand up to skeptical arguments, scientific arguments, which question the very roots of faith. That is not the weakness of that approach. By the way, it's just a digression. I think it's a wrong-headed approach to try to fight with science on its own grounds, to try to fight with skepticism on its own grounds. The path of bhakti, of devotion, was not meant for that. It was meant for, we already do have a certain amount of faith. Use it, cultivate spirituality, and the proof will come to you eventually. So that's the way. But in the very beginning, if you start questioning, which science will, which a skeptic will, then the devotional paths, and Christianity is almost entirely devotional, so is Judaism, Islam, and most forms of Hinduism. They are vulnerable to that kind of skeptical questioning. And so if you just see some of these debates between theologians and rabbis, mostly rabbis and Christian theologians, and the new skeptics, Dawkins and Hitchens and so on, you will almost always see the people on the side of religion coming off worse. So that's one kind of religion, and that's not Advaita. There's another kind of religion which Swami Vivekananda strongly introduced. I will not speak about it because Swami Atmarupanji just told us about it. That is the path of experience. As Swamiji said, it is a very scientific path. And that's why I think Swami Vivekananda, when he came to this country, in fact, right here in the Vedanta Society of New York, he translated the Raja Yoga, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So what he primarily taught and what appealed to people was not the Advaita I'm going to talk about, but was more the Raja Yoga, the Patanjali Yoga Swami Atmarupanji was just speaking about, because it's scientific. Do this, you don't have to believe. Here, these are the practices. Do it and see for yourself. Proof is offered, experience is offered. What is offered? Extraordinary experiences, which will prove to you the claims of religion. Swami Vivekananda said, religion is realization. If there is an immortal soul, I must feel it. If there God exists, I must see it. And that was Swamiji's approach. I think he stood for the spirit of this new age. By the way, none of this is Advaita. I'm just telling you what it is not. Swami Vivekananda stood for the spirit of the new age, where he questioned and he asked for an experience. Remember, how does Narendranath become Vivekananda? He goes around asking, can I see God? Have you seen God? And he finds an answer in Sri Ramakrishna, who gives a very empirical answer. I have seen God. So can you. If you follow these practices, you can see God. And that's how the young student Narendranath becomes Swami Vivekananda. So he offers a path of experience. Do these practices and you will see God, or you will actually experience your own immortal soul. And the claims of religion will be empirically proved to you. By what? By experience. What experience? Extraordinary experience, mystical experiences, different kinds of samadhi, which will deliver unto you the proof that you seek. Okay, what's the problem here? Twofold, I think. One is that these are rare. Most of us do not have them, and they take assiduous, dedicated cultivation of the methods spoken of in Patanjali Yoga to reach even the first steps of some kind of insight. But then that's true of every kind of spiritual practice. The second thing is, even if we have extraordinary experiences, just because they are extraordinary, the skeptics will be barking at your, nipping at your heels all over again. They'll say, oh yeah, we don't deny that you have those experiences, but it doesn't prove that you are one with God, or you have this universal consciousness, or you are this pure consciousness apart from the mind and body. It just means that you have a lesion or a clot in your brain on this side, and that is putting pressure on certain nerves, and you're getting these experiences. You don't even have to be a modern neuroscientist or psychologist to debunk such things. Even in Sri Ramakrishna's time and all throughout history, such mystics were often derided as madmen. Sri Ramakrishna was called, they said he was mad. So you run that risk when you're chasing mystical experiences. Okay, none of this is Advaita Vedanta. What is Advaita Vedanta? If it is not a journey in space, time, and from one object to another, if it is not action, karma, if it is not devotion, bhakti, if it is not mystical experience, yoga, what is it? So Advaita Vedanta tells you about what we are, shows us what we are right now, all the time, right here, everywhere, and I myself, it points it out. Not depending on faith, not even depending on extraordinary experience, rather ordinary experience. Advaita Vedanta investigates our ordinary experience, that you are seeing something. That's enough. Do you see? Do you hear, smell, taste, touch? Yes, I do. That's enough. Do you wake, dream, or do you have deep sleep? Yes, I do. That's enough. Do you feel that you exist, that you are aware, that you want joy and peace and happiness? That's enough. Our common experience, based on what experience we all possess all the time, Advaita Vedanta will give us pointers, indicate to us our real nature. So that brings me to the sixth point, the sixth answer to what is Vedanta or what is Advaita. Advaita says that thou art. Advaita can be expressed very simply. That one advantage of Advaita Vedanta is there are very succinct explanation, definitions of Advaita. Advaita is that thou art. There is an ultimate reality, existence, consciousness, bliss, unlimited existence, consciousness, bliss. If you know yourself as that, all your problems will be solved. You go beyond suffering and attain permanent, unshakable completion, fulfillment, happiness, peace. So that absolute reality is you. All of us, we are that already. Whether you know it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you practice or not, we are already that. We just have to realize that we are that. And that is the whole teaching of Advaita Vedanta, the so-called great sentences, Mahavakya. They express the entirety of Advaita Vedanta, that thou art. That's one from one of the Upanishads, Chandogya. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. That's another one from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This very self is Brahman. I am Atma Brahma. This very self is Brahman. That's from the Mandukya Upanishad. Then Prajnanam Brahma, the awareness that we all feel. The awareness that we all feel right now, Prajnanam. That is Brahman. From the Rigvedic Upanishad, the Aitareya Upanishad. So this is Advaita. that you are that ultimate reality. We have to realize it. How do you realize it? That is what what Advaita tells us and shows us how to do that. One of the attractions of Advaita at this point would be, notice it, the difference is that because you are that right now, it should be possible to realize it effortlessly. I mean, what effort do you have to put in to be what you are? For example, here I can see some of you sitting in chairs. So if I tell you, sit in a chair, what effort do you have to do? Nothing. You just have to realize, here I am sitting in a chair. If I tell you to stand up and take a walk or go and jog, you have to put in some effort. But just to sit in a chair, which you all already are doing, you don't have to do anything. Similarly, Advaita Vedanta is telling us to realize something that's already established, that's already there. It also should be possible to realize this timelessly. That means, or instantaneously, because we have already that. How long does it take you to realize what you already are? Right now, right here, effortlessly. Of course, you should read the fine print, not so fast. If it's so effortless and if it is so instantaneous, one should be enlightened after one Advaita talk, and that also should be possible, but often it is not. The problem is not with Advaita, as in all paths, the problem lies with us. So that's the sixth understanding of Advaita that I came up with, that thou art. One more and I'm done. Swami Vivekananda expanded Vedanta. So now we're back to Vedanta again. Expanded Vedanta, the conception of Vedanta, enormously. I liked what Swami Atmarupanji said. When Swami Vivekananda said, I'll take it out of the forests and bring it to the cities. It's not just taking it out of the hands of a few exclusive practitioners and scattering it worldwide. That's how I understood it. But also expanding Vedanta into all fields of human activity. For example, making it practically relevant to our worldly problems, not just ultimate enlightenment. Also, expanding Vedanta and seeing Vedanta not only as the philosophy of all Hindu sects, but as the core philosophy of religion itself. So I'll make this huge claim. Underlying all religion is Vedanta. At the core of all religion, the essential nature of all religion is Vedanta. That might sound fanatical, so we won't insist on using the term Vedanta. I mean, you could use the term perennial philosophy, like Aldous Huxley said, that there is an ultimate reality, that somehow our very nature, and there are different ways of realizing it, and we have to realize it. That's the whole of religion. So in Swami Vivekananda's words, each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity already within us. And you can do it by knowledge, you can do it by meditation, you can do it by devotion, you can do it by action, by one or more or all of these, and attain freedom. Freedom from suffering, freedom from want, established in permanent joy and happiness. This is the whole of religion. Books, temples, doctrines, churches, secondary details. Swami Vivekananda said, Vedanta has these two aspects. One is the divinity within us, that our real nature is divine, not mortal. And the second is the oneness of all existence, that we are all one reality. And the difference is only an appearance. The underlying it is the reality, which is one. He said, my goal in life is to preach unto humanity that their inner divinity. And he says, I shall go on working until the universe will know that it is one with God. You see the divinity and oneness. Okay, right on time. Let me quickly summarize in one sentence. Seven ways of understanding Vedanta as the ground philosophy of different Hindu sects, as Vedanta, the highest teaching of the Vedas, as the teaching of the Upanishads, as something which is not a journey in space, time, or from one object to another, but from ignorance to knowledge, as not being actually, essentially, action or faith or mystical experience, but knowledge, philosophical insight, as that thou art, and as the ground reality, as the essence of all religions, consisting of the divinity within us and the oneness of all existence. So those are 7 different ways of answering the question, what is Vedanta, what is Advaita? Okay.
Beautiful, very specific. Can you hear me? Earphones on? Can you all hear?
It's a little low.
No.
It's a little low. Okay, let me turn this up.
I don't know, it's coming from some other microphone maybe.
Well, I've got, can you hear me now?
A little better.
No?
I think you're coming through my microphone, no?
I think
Can you hear
so.
me now?
It still feels like it's not coming from your headset. It feels like it's coming from somewhere else.
Okay. I'll take the headset off. Okay.
No.
So, Swami Vivekananda, do you have a question to pose?
Yes. So you talked about what Vedanta is and what Advaita is, and because of the retreat being about the two traditions, I would be interested to hear your differentiation of yoga and Vedanta. You implied some, especially Advaita Vedanta, you implied some differences in that in Vedanta you're not doing anything, whereas in yoga you're trying to perfect the mind. But if you could just elaborate a little bit about the distinctions between Advaita Vedanta and yoga as Raja Yoga as paths.
Yes, Maharaj. Just as Swami Atmarupanji had said at the beginning of his talk about yoga being a school, a distinct school of philosophy, Patanjali yoga being a distinct school of orthodox Hindu philosophy, Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta is also a distinct school of philosophy. So they take great pains to distinguish each other, each school from the other school. So how would you distinguish Advaita Vedanta from Patanjali Yoga? I'm now not talking about Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, which is a very unique creation in itself. So there are major differences. One is, according to Advaita Vedanta, we are this infinite existence consciousness bliss, which is non-dual. This is the biggest difference. Non-duality means there is nothing else apart from Brahman, the ultimate reality. You are that Brahman. So what about this entire vast world of differentiation? These buildings and people and stars and planets and quarks and quasars. What are these? According to Advaita Vedanta, they are all appearances in Brahman. They're nothing different from Brahman. Just like a movie is nothing different from the screen in which it appears, though it appears to be so many different things. Just as in a dream, we dream about so many people, so many places, so many activities, and yet none of it exists apart from the dreaming mind. So also, or like a classic example, though a rope by mistake may appear to be a snake to somebody and a discarded garland to somebody else and a crack in the earth to somebody else, or a stream of water to take classic Sanskrit examples, all of it being nothing but the rope and the rest being an error or an appearance. Advaita Vedanta actually has the chutzpah to claim that all of that which we experience is an appearance. And what we do not seem to experience at all, that is actually the reality. You are in infinite existence, which we don't seem to see, and you are that. And what you see and hear and touch and think to be the reality, that's not at all the reality. That's an appearance. Whereas in yoga philosophy, philosophically speaking, what you see around yourself is solidly real. It's out there. There is a universe as described by the most materialistic science. It's out there. It's there. And only difference is you are this pure consciousness which seems to have gotten mixed up with this material reality, and you have to see your difference from it. So Advaita Vedanta considers the world to be an appearance and the reality to be non-dual. Yoga philosophy, as the Swami has already said, is firmly dualistic, that there is a dualism between consciousness and the other. The world is real. Advaita Vedanta considers all of us to be one reality. Yoga is firmly set that we are all different consciousnesses, separate consciousnesses. In Advaita Vedanta, the method is a philosophical insight based on, the method is you study and you reason it out, and then you meditate on what you have got, you will see this reality presenting itself. Whereas in yoga, as the Swami said, the method is calming the mind down to an absolute quiescence, so that the consciousness which has become mixed up with material reality reveals itself in its isolated splendor. These are some of the differences. Raja Yoga, the book written by Swami Vivekananda, is a unique synthesis. As Swami Atmarupanji mentioned, Swami Vivekananda started the project of reuniting the knowledge and the meditation aspects of the ancient Veda, which had separated into Advaita Vedanta and Patanjali Yoga. He synthesizes them in his book, Raja Yoga. Okay. I'll just add a humorous note here. I met this monk long ago in the Himalayas, young monk who was meditating a lot just above the Ganga. He had a cave, he used to meditate. I asked him what he was practicing. He said he was practicing Patanjali Yoga to attain Samadhi. So I asked him, what do you think about, in Hindi, we are talking in Hindi. I asked him, so that's good, but what do you think about Advaita Vedanta? And his answer is a very typically yogic answer. He said, yeah, that's good, but they talk a lot. They don't have experience. So from a yogic perspective, Patanjali Yoga perspective, the Advaitins are always into books and reasoning and nowadays webinars and workshops, whereas the yogi has to shut all that down and sit down quietly and meditate. This is a yogic criticism of Advaita Vedanta. The Advaita criticism of the yogi would be that, what's the point of sitting quietly? You have to realize, get knowledge, and knowledge comes from cultivating knowledge and then getting that insight. Sitting quietly might be useful as a preliminary, and calm down and then focus. But just sitting quietly, what's the point of it? Both are, of course, overdoing it. They're over criticizing each other's perspectives. There's a point to both.
Swami, there's one here on chat, and then we'll go over to Lakshmi for raised hands. You had said the second aspect of Vedanta is everything in the world is just appearance. In that context, there is no concept of good or bad, peaceful or violent, and anything else which we perceive in our minds. So in that respect, why should we strive to be good and seek peace? Because they are all essentially appearances.
Right. And notice, this is I'll give you a key to solving most problems in Advaita Vedanta. And most questions in Advaita Vedanta come out of a mixing up of two levels. So Advaita Vedanta talks about the ultimate reality, which we all are, existence, consciousness, bliss, but which appears as this word. So now you have that ultimate reality, which we all are, all you have to know is, I am that. And then you are back to acting in the level of this world. This world is an appearance of that. Now, what do I mean by that? Notice your question. You talked about something, there is no good and bad, there is nothing evil, or there is no need to attain or strive for anything, it is always attained. So why should we strive to do anything in our mind? Notice by the time you mention the mind, you're already back to the level of appearance. In the mind, there is good and bad. In the world, there is something to be worked for, there is something to be avoided. The entire world appearance has its own logic. The inner reality of that is what Advaita Vedanta talks about, of what is this world actually and what I am actually. So what's the point of this? Once you realize that you are an unlimited, infinite being, that you cannot die, that you do not need anything from this world, you need not be afraid of anything at all. This strength and fearlessness comes to you. When this world appears to you, as it does, and this body appears to you, and your own life appears, then in this world, we can act with fearlessness, with compassion, with a feeling of oneness. That all flows from my realization that I am this one divine reality. So you see, always think in terms of these two, ultimate reality and its expression in the world. Most confusions in Advaita Vedanta, questions in Advaita Vedanta arise out of a confusing of these two, conflating of these two levels. They're called the Paramarthika, the absolute reality, and the Vyavaharika, the transactional reality, the empirical reality. So right now, we are here we are virtually here. So we are in an online workshop, and we are studying Vedanta. If you are the ultimate reality Brahman, why do you have to be in an online workshop and study Vedanta? You are already there, perfect. True, but at this level, we see our bodies, we have our minds, we have our lives, and there are imperfections and problems, so we have to deal with it. And the knowledge that we are Brahman helps us to deal with it most effectively.
Oh, very good. Lakshmi, do you have someone?
Yeah, I have seven hand raised.
We can't hear you. Mataji, you're muted.
State your name and keep your question to 2 seconds.
Okay.
Is there somebody asking a question?
Lakshmi, please go ahead.
Yeah, Gaurav.
Okay.
Please
I
unmute.
didn't hear my name. Pranams Maharaj. So you said that in Advaith Vedanta we use like
State your
common
name.
experience.
Please state your name.
So I'm
and-
Gaurav Mittal, Pranam Maharaj.
Gaurav, yes.
So you said in Advaith Vedanta like we use common experience to understand the reality.
Yes.
But in the end, also in Advaith Vedanta, we have to wait for the extraordinary experience for switch off, like in the transactional domain, switching of reference of I from right now to ego to the witness consciousness.
Yes.
So that also like is like appears to be hard work and like
Yes.
even the Atmachar, yeah.
So that is called, you're right. So that is called Brahmakara Vritti, the moment of enlightenment, the moment of piercing through this veil of Maya and realizing that I am Brahman. It means, as you said, switching the reference of the I from body mind to Brahman, to the witness consciousness. Now you've seen that also seems to be, first of all, an extraordinary experience, and also it takes a lot of hard work. But notice something, that whether you know it or not, whether you have that ultimate enlightening experience or not, you are Brahman right now. That ultimate enlightening experience won't make any difference to you being Brahman. You just realize what already was. When we get that experience, when we get that insight into what we are, it will not be that I am suddenly Brahman. I was this little guy called Sarvapriyananda. Now I am this infinite Brahman. No, what I will notice is it always was so. I just somehow I didn't see it. This somehow is the gap where Maya operates. Somehow I didn't see it. Now I see what was always the case, not only with me, with everybody else. And at that moment, the transition, that switching of the reference of the I from body mind to Atman, witness consciousness, Brahman, the absolute reality, whatever you call it, that switching is instantaneous. That switching is effortless. Yeah, that happens. But what you are saying is the preliminary to that. It may be preceded by years and years of moral purification. It may be preceded by years and years of trying to calm down the mind, and years of cultivating Vedantic study and reasoning and meditation. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. This is where, it's a good question. It helps me to bring back something I discarded earlier. Karma, Bhakti, Yoga. So yes, it is true. Advaita is not karma, not bhakti, and not yoga, but Advaita does not work without them. It requires karma to be converted from selfish action to unselfish action, which purifies the mind, karma yoga. It requires bhakti, devotion to God, the deity, what is called the Saguna Brahman, the God of religion, in order to wipe out our worldliness and purify ourselves and transform our inner being by devotion to God. It's very helpful, almost I would say indispensable. Take the help of God, the grace of God in your non-dualistic path. And finally, it requires calming down the mind through yogic practices. All of these almost are essential for that final insight to arise. But the final insight arises from the Upanishadic teachings or Advaitic teachings. So this is a more comprehensive view of what Advaita sadhana involves. Yeah.
We have 3 minutes. One quick answer to a quick question: how to use Advaita in daily life?
Okay. The way I'd say it, and traditional teachers would say it, is don't. To begin with, give all our attention to studying Vedanta, trying to understand it, and trying to assimilate the teachings. As Swami Vivekananda said, keep these high thoughts constantly before the mind. And from these high and noble thoughts, great action will come. We have hypnotized ourselves into littleness, into pettiness. So as we fill ourselves with Advaitic thoughts, the application in daily life will start coming. But the emphasis should be on learning, cultivating, and staying, immersing yourself in Advaitic thoughts, even long before actual enlightenment. And then the applications will start flowing from that. Don't take your Ferrari out for a spin before you have learned to drive in a parking lot. So you're going to crash.